Okay, so hello, ahoy, good evening, everyone. Jay Saki here, joined by Giles. Giles, how you doing?
Pretty okay.
Yeah, you know what? I think we have to start this podcast off by stating that this is not an AI channel, and we are not AIs. We are real people. Sadly, we're starting YouTube in an age where people are going to just start assuming everything's an AI, and no AI is going on here. This is real people having real conversations for those out there who foster such a thing. So if you ever want to get away from all the AI slop that's online and just hear you know a couple guys talk about movies and film, this channel's for you.
That was kind of weird actually, because I saw a AI priest on YouTube who is basically just an AI copy of a real priest, but it was done by a scam artist.
Oh, so
I,
go to AI Priest for spiritual counseling?
no, more like donate money to my mission that doesn't exist.
Ah, go figure. On that note, yeah, the cover images you see for Giles and I designed those myself. I did not use an AI generator to make those. So the further we can get away from AI, the better. At least for now, that's the verdict at this moment. So tonight, I think we really wanted to talk about Akira Kurosawa, Akira Kurosawa films. We're not, reviewing any one specific movie, but we're just talking about like Akira Kurosawa, the man in general, and his films. We will talk about, some of his films that are significant to us. My first question for you, Giles, is what is your history with Akira Kurosawa movies? Like, when did you first see one, and so on and so forth?
It kind of started with world history, and I was just reading up about the history of Japan, and I got a hold of some other samurai cinema. They're kind of split into two different ones. Chanbara, which is a more action sword fighting based film, and Jiraigeki, which is literally just a Japanese period drama. So I was watching all of that, and my friend said, "Oh, well, if you like these, you have to look up Akira Kurosawa." So I went out, bought the DVD box set, and I watched every single film in the space of about 4 days.
Oh my goodness. You have, are you, this box set, is it all of the Kurosawa's movies?
Not every single one. I had to track down some other ones which were rarer, and some of them had not been translated into English yet. So I had to wait on some of those. But this was pretty much every one of his samurai or period drama films.
How many movies was that you watched?
I think it was 12.
Okay, wow, you've already outclassed me in terms of your knowledge of this guy's films because I've only watched 5 at this point in my life. But like what was the okay, well, yeah, my history was sometime in my teenage years someone insisted that I should see Seven Samurai. I remember watching it and I remember thinking it's a little bit interesting, like black and white samurai movie, foreign language film. It was a little interesting, but overall, I think I was a bit bored. Granted, I was still a teenager, still developing tastes, and my heart may not have been in the right place to appreciate it. Then, maybe a couple of years later, I had a theology teacher in Catholic high school who wanted to show us Rashomon for reasons. I honestly think he just wanted to show us one of his favorite films, but yeah, I could see the reasons to show that in school and discuss the morality of it. And I remember thinking Rashomon was pretty good. It was a very striking movie to me. Then years later, like probably 8 years later, 9 years later, a friend wanted me to watch Yojimbo, which I watched and I thought it was like, okay enough. And then my me uh watching Kurosawa movies went dormant for a very long time until recently. I think I decided that I really wanted to get educated and watch a lot more of his movies and rewatch the ones that I saw from the past and see if I had a better appreciation. I think it was partially sparked by you mentioning in the one podcast we did where you said you wanted to make more time to watch Yojimbo. So for me, Very recently, yeah, I watched four of his films right in a row. Well, right, four of his films over the course of like 4 weeks. So here's another question for you. Have you ever seen the movie Vengeance that came out probably about 5 years ago?
I have, yes.
Oh, directed by B.J. Novak. You know it.
Mhm.
There's a bit in that movie where the villain, I promise when I tie this in to what we're talking about, has a monologue, and he says, "How many people who've posted a Oscar Wilde quote online have actually read one of his plays? And how many people who have reposted a picture of Audrey Hepburn have actually seen one of her movies?" Then he's like, he talks to the main character. He's like, what musicians do you like to listen to? And he's like, let me guess, you're a playlist guy. You go to a website that generates a bunch of music based on a couple songs you like, and you don't even know the names of the artists. And he's making a point about, I don't know, the fractured information that we intake, I guess. People knowing little bits of things, but not actually getting a greater sense of the whole, or knowing artists beyond a couple things. On that note, how many people today who offhandedly mention Akira Kurosawa have actually seen one of his movies? And I'm not talking about the boomer filmmakers. I'm sure Scorsese, Spielberg, Tarantino have all seen all of his movies. Boom. But like your average person who's like, oh yeah, Akira Kurosawa. Like, how many people have actually watched an Akira Kurosawa film?
I can tell you exactly because I go to a small cinema in this next city to me, which like specifically shows a lot of older films and a lot of art films and a lot of foreign films, and it's a hub for film students. And film students do not shut up about Akira Kurosawa films, so I can tell you at least they watch them.
Okay, good. Well, film students, my theory is most people have probably seen one of his movies and they have some idea that he's generally a great person. So when he comes up in conversation, people will nod and say, "Oh yeah, the great Akira Kurosawa." But it's like, they probably haven't seen that much. I'm guessing everyone's probably seen Seven Samurai because that seems to be the one that, in my experience, gets around a lot. After that, maybe Rashomon, but I think generally a lot of people have not seen that many of his movies.
There's a reason for that. Rashomon was the film that really was his breakout film into the West. And while many people didn't actually go and see it, it created enough buzz for him as a director for them to go see the next film, which was Seven Samurai.
Yeah, there you have it. That's probably how it is. Yeah, so that's part of what made me want to actually watch a bunch of his movies, so I actually have an idea because I was also recently like on YouTube listening to little clips of Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino constantly referencing the great Akira Kurosawa, and I'm like, you know what? I like movies. I like great filmmaking. I should watch more of this guy's movies. So I'm going to give you a hypothesis that I had before I started watching all the movies that I watched. So everyone says, or at least, the boomer filmmakers will say that he's like super influential. He's a big influential filmmaker. My hypothesis was that he's really not, that he, this was my hypothesis at the time. Well, we'll get into whether or not it's changed. The hypothesis was he was just a very average filmmaker coming along at a time when people were getting tired of westerns and gangster films. And then Kurosawa gave everyone samurai films. So everybody ate that up and everyone's like, oh, awesome, something that's different for once. And yes, people definitely, future filmmakers definitely got hugely influenced by him, but more so by virtue of the fact that he was just popular and people were able to watch his movies and think about filmmaking. That was my hypothesis. Do you think that hypothesis held up well at all, or or do you think there might be some truth to that?
I think that hypothesis really won't and didn't hold up, mostly because it's factually inaccurate. I don't mean to make fun, but I think it's well known now that a lot of westerns and the western genre itself were inspired by his movies. So I think I'll throw it back to you and have you answer the question.
Okay, so this is what happened with my with my extravaganza and watching a whole bunch of his movies. Exactly four of them, which I think is honestly more movies than a lot of people than most people have watched, or at least it's more than most people have watched very recently. It doesn't count when it's been like 20 or 30 years since you've seen one of his movies when you're a teenager. Like you have to have watched his movies more concurrently. So I watched Yojimbo from 1961, Sanjiro, the sequel from 1962, Rashomon, 1950, and then Hidden Fortress, 1958. I would say I was mostly wrong. Mostly. Because, okay, when I watched Yojimbo, I was like, wow, that was really good. It was a very impactful movie. Then I watched Sanjiro, the sequel, or like spiritual sequel. We'll get into that. And I thought that was not quite as good, but I thought it was still pretty neat, pretty cool. I watched Rashomon and I thought that was like really good. And I could see all the great influences. Like yeah, I could see that Kurosawa really thought about directing his actors and setting up his shots and doing very specific things with his framing. I saw it all there and I was like, okay, obviously I was wrong. Obviously he really influenced, the future of how people made films. And had I just watched those three, I only would have had wonderful things to say about how I only would have had wonderful things to say about how wrong I was. Then I watched The Hidden Fortress. I said to myself, that's the one that everyone says influenced George Lucas and Star Wars, which kind of raises a red flag. So I'm like, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I watched Hidden Fortress and it made me think that at least a little bit of that hypothesis is still true. There is some element of he did not necessarily influence everything for the quote unquote better. It was in part just something that, yes, some filmmakers grew up with, so it influenced them by virtue of the fact that it was an influence, but it doesn't necessarily mean he transformed everyone. I think some of his movies might. I've not seen all of his movies. He has 30 films, but uh, Hidden Fortress was a step down for me, and it made me. And the idea that like George Lucas had this movie as an influence for Star Wars, like yes, I could see the influence, the little things that were the plot points and things. But Hidden Fortress, little mini review here. It was kind of like one of those old biblical epics or sword and sandal epics, like Ben Hur or Ten Commandments. There's some of those movies that are like really good, and then you have movies like I don't know, like there's probably some like Julius Caesar movie or Cleopatra movie. And if you watch those movies, it's like, like they're technically like fine, there's a lot of like fine filmmaking, but they are a bit of a slog to get through because they don't hold up so well. And I kind of had that reaction with The Hidden Fortress. It was technically like, yes, some of Kurosawa's, directing was on display, but I have a rule with watching movies. Apologies if I'm going on a little bit long with this one, but I want to explain this. One of my rules is to not break a movie apart while I'm watching it. Like I don't want to watch half the movie one night and then finish up the next night because it sort of like sucks the oxygen out of me when I'm trying to watch it the next day. Like even if I'm watching a 4 hour long movie, I try to watch the whole thing in one evening if I can. And Hidden Fortress was only like 2.5 hours long, but it lost me really early on, and it ended up taking like 3 nights to get through it, and it was purely out of the education. Like, yes, get this one off your list. That was it. So, but apparently, a lot of people, it's a critically acclaimed movie, quote unquote. And George Lucas says it was an an influence on Star Wars. So, who am I to judge?
I kind of have to interrupt you there because and one thing that actually stood out is that you kind of comparing it to like a sword and sandal kind of movie. Um, I think the reason why it didn't sit with you is because The Hidden Fortress is actually meant to be like an adventure comedy, but it's Japanese, and the Japanese like humor is so different from Western humor.
That could be true. That could be true. Uh,
Japan loves a lot of wordplay, and it only works in Japanese.
well, apparently it worked for George Lucas.
Oh
I
yeah, he liked more like the under the perception of like the lower class characters rising up, against a crooked authority.
Yeah, I think I should. One of my thoughts was because I've always heard this movie talked about and synonymous with Star Wars. To the audience out there, if you watch this film, it basically starts off with two characters walking through a desert bickering. I forget what they're trying to do, but they're like, they get into a fight. They go like, "Fine, we'll go our own directions." It's kind of like C3PO and R2D2 splitting up, and then they both get captured and then put in a prison camp, and they meet each other again, and then they have to break out of the prison camp, and then they end up meeting a guy who's like a great general in hiding in disguise. So he does not look like a general. And I guess he's kind of like the Obi-Wan Kenobi character, I guess, of the story. And then they all find like a princess. This is all during a big war, and they have to like escort her to her kingdom. So yeah, there's some Star Wars plot points kind of pulled from this movie. That's basically why it was an influence on the first Star Wars.
Talking about influence is why everyone mentions Akira Kurosawa, because everyone remembers him primarily for his samurai films, but he set the rules for a lot of film genres going forward. He basically created the buddy cop genre with his movie in 1949, Stray Dogs. He heavily influenced the police procedurals with High and Low. He almost created, I think he's credited with it, but it's slightly debatable, the non-linear storytelling with Rashomon that went on to, inspire things like The Usual Suspects and Reservoir Dogs. And then all of his samurai films, which have been turned into westerns.
Yeah. Actually, do you mind if I talk about some of these movies I watched more specifically? I've discussed Hidden Fortress, but I really wanted to talk about Yojimbo a
Yep,
bit. You like this one a lot, don't you?
I do, yes.
So whenever I watch older black and white films, I always find it interesting finding little things that clearly influenced all the future films I've seen. So there'll be some line of dialogue or something that happens, and I'll see it in an older movie. I'm like, that's where that comes from. I had no idea. And what I thought was interesting about Yojimbo was the main character, Sanjiro, the wandering samurai. I thought he clearly I'm pretty sure so many future anime samurai are all based on this character because well actually a lot of characters in Yojimbo reminded me of anime characters. So I was watching this movie thinking like that's where that character comes from. That's where that character comes from. That's where that character comes from. Because I remember thinking these, in anime, uh, they might have a certain cartoony, hokey anime way of acting, but I'm like, oh no, that's just how they're written because this goes back to Yojimbo, how these characters are written, how they talk, and how they interact. Does that sound right to you?
I kind of get it, and that's really down to the actor who plays him and is in a lot of Akira Kurosawa films, Toshihiro Mifune, who Akira Kurosawa really liked working with. He in Yojimbo kind of plays like the rascal hero in that he's not really doing things by ethical means, but he is sort of like robbing two gambling cartels and forcing them into a war.
Yes. I actually thought Yojimbo was a very spiritually nourishing film because it's basically about a very bad person finally doing one thing good in all this chaos. And then because he does one good thing, he has to get the living daylights beaten out of him for it. And I thought
Well,
that was pretty beautiful.
actually, talking about spiritually nourishing, there's one film I mentioned to you before, and I wanted to bring up. It's Ikiru.
Yes, I've not watched that one, but I looked up
It's
and it looked like it was pretty significant.
it was another one of his like really really influential films, but not many people have kind of see it. It's about a Japanese bureaucrat who kind of lives and works a soul crushing job. just rubber stamping laws and other things that he has really no concept of or their significance. And he learns he's going to die of stomach cancer. I'm giving away all the plot, by the way, but it's kind of necessary. So he gets to, obviously depressed about the fact that he's going to die in pain of incurable stomach cancer. And then he meets one of his interns, I believe it was, and she convinces him that the great thing he can do for himself now is doing something else for someone else. So he creates a park, like a children's park, in a rundown, poor area before he dies.
Well, that's nice. Does that film hit you in the feels?
As the young people would say, I guess, yes, it's very akin to like It's a Wonderful Life, at least in tone.
Ah. But if I may segue this back to Yojimbo, yeah, whenever I watch the movie, a bunch of the characters remind me of anime characters, and Sojiro specifically. If there's ever, to the audience out there who watches anime, if you ever have a show where you have like a anti-hero samurai character who's, how do I say it? Anti-hero samurai character who's a bit mysterious but is like totally awesome. I think Patient Zero for that is the main character Sanjiro in Yojimbo. And I would say even more so in the sequel film, just titled Sanjiro, that came out the very next year. Which, fun fact, I believe the movie was actually supposed to be based on a book, and it was supposed to not be connected to Yojimbo. But I think either audiences or like the studio really loved the character from Yojimbo, so they said, "Can you just make this movie like the future adventures of this guy?" So they basically made the main character from Yojimbo the main character in Sanjiro. But in Sanjiro, he does all the like lazy leaning poses with his resting his head on his hand, and he might as well be like chewing a reed or something with his sword off to the side, like, you guys are just a bunch of fools, let me get it done. Yeah, like all his poses and actions in Sanjiro solidified, oh, this is where all these anime samurai come from. So I felt like I got a strong education there between both those movies. I'm like, this is where all the anime samurai go back to. Unless there's something that happened before these movies. I mean, I'm sure there are novels and books written in Japanese history, so maybe this goes back a little bit further. I just know, to me, in terms of like visually on the screen, this was that mysterious anti-hero gruff samurai that has been interpreted in so many animes and in so many different kinds of characters. So it's not just anime being tacky. Yes, if you're a young 13, 14-year-old and your parents are saying your anime is no good and the characters are dumb, you can be like, well, mommy and daddy, on the Jay Saki show, they said that all these characters are personified by the characters from Yojimbo and Sanjiro. Ah, ah, ah.
Your parents look to get you a special education or medication.
Yeah, so yeah, looks at both those movies. Really enjoyed them. Rashomon. Do you have any more thoughts on this one?
Rashomon is interesting to me because not only is, like I said, it's got that non-linear storytelling, but another aspect of it is the unreliable narrator of trying to put this mystery together, and you can't believe anyone who's talking.
Yeah, actually, I suspect most people out there have vaguely heard, because this is based on, like, I think a novella. And
Yes.
I think a lot of you out there actually have either read the novella or vaguely remember someone else describing it. The story is there's a man and a woman, husband and wife, traveling, and a brigand shows up and he starts something with them, and the husband dies, and the surviving wife and the brigand are brought into the courts, the police, and they're being interviewed about what happened. And everyone has a different story. The wife is like, "Oh, it all went down this way," and the brigand's like, "Oh, it all went down this way." And then, interestingly enough, they bring in a medium to resurrect the spirit of the dead husband, who's like, "This is how it all happened." And everyone's kind of, I get, maybe I shouldn't spoil it. You're hearing about an incident, and it's all about everyone painting the incident to favor themselves. And I think it is a very good interpretation about like how people lie to themselves and rework the truth.
It's just a really interesting mystery movie of one of them's got to be telling the truth, but who is it and how do you decide?
Yeah, I also think the movie has a very cozy feel to it. I like the opening of that movie because it starts off like it's just like it's raining. And just a few peasants are sitting underneath an old wrecked building, just like talking about the story they heard, and it keeps cutting back to them in the rain. And I find rain very inspiring. It's one, I guess it's like a weak point in the movie. Oh, the movie has features rain. Let's have rain in the movie. So something about the movie, cozy, very striking, very good. I give it a strong recommendation, Rashomon, for like a first Kurosawa movie.
Those are all the four you've seen, right?
Yes, I mean I have seen Seven Samurai, but not since I was like 16. So I would have to rewatch the whole thing again to get a strong opinion. Do you think Seven Samurai is really good or what? Do you think it's okay?
It's very good. Again, it went on to inspire some of the most famous westerns.
Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, and Magnificent Seven, and Battle Beyond the Stars,
Don't
which is a
know.
sci-fi film.
Well, here's a question. Do you really like Ran, right?
I really like Ran, and I was about to bring this up, but e- seeing that Akira Kurosawa has basically either created or written the rules for several genres, he really liked interpreting Shakespeare to Japanese history and mythology. And Ran is one of them, as it's the adaptation of King Lear.
Wasn't Ran a 1985 movie?
Yeah, it was one of his last.
It's amazing that his career went from like the late 40s to the mid 80s. I really want to watch Rand, but I want to make sure I'm in the right mood. I don't want to rush into it like Hidden Fortress and be like watching it in pieces because I know Rand is kind of a long one. And I once offhandedly heard someone back in the day say, "Oh, Rand, that movie's so boring." That was back in my teenage years, somebody in high school. But like, you know what? I want to. I don't want to be one of those people who goes into it too quickly and gets bored because I'm not prepared. So I want to make sure I'm in a good mood, the right mood. That way I can watch the whole thing in one night and not be watching half one night, half the next night because that never works well to do that. You got to watch if you once you start, you got to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, I think the last recommendation I kind of would have in that genre of his would be Kagemusha, which is more of a period drama, and it is a very interesting character study film. It's about a thief that sort of looks like the daimyo, the military leader. So he gets caught, and the guy is like, "Oh wow, you do look a lot like me. Hey, how would you like to be like my body double? So all those dangerous things, you can be there, and if you get killed, well, you're my body double." But the guy dies, and they want to cover up his death because it would be perilous for their clan if it came out the guy died before this big battle they're supposed to have. So this guy has to literally impersonate him and act as he would.
Fascinating. So I wanted to actually talk a little bit about having your heart in the right place to appreciate art. Because like have you ever watched a movie at one time in your life and you didn't get it? And then like you watch it 10 years later and then it hits you in the right way and you're like, "Oh, this is really good." Or maybe you watch a movie or read a book and you don't care for it, and then you have a conversation with a friend a month later about the book, and he's like, "Oh, well, what about this, this, and that?" And then you're like, "Oh, there is a lot more merit than I initially realized. I just wasn't, heart was not in the right place." Do you ever have that?
I've had it for a couple of films. They're usually not foreign films, but more art house films. And art house films can be really hit or miss.
Would you say a lot of Kurosawa stuff is art house?
No, I think it gets included into that. I think there's a weird cross pollination of these kind of terms in cinema that Akira Kurosawa they're not art films. They're not like films meant to be some kind of expressive art. They're just master crafted films.
Right, but by today's standards, watching a black and white movie. Like, oh, an art house movie. Oh, we're watching Three Stooges. It's an art house movie.
I guess, but I think that's kind of lazy.
Yeah, I was making a joke there with Three Stooges about like having your heart in the right place. Like Yojimbo was one where when I first saw it, like probably over 11, 12 years ago, I was like, okay, whatever, a little interesting. But whenever I watched it, within the last couple of months, the movie hit me very deeply for a few reasons. One, it was just about someone who was a bad man having a moment of grace where he does something good and has to get beaten terribly because he did something good. But also just the opening of the movie. Like the movie just starts with like a wandering samurai wandering around, picks up a stick and throws it in the air to see which direction it points, and he walks the direction the stick points, and that is the instigating moment that leads to everything that happens. And when I first watched it, it's like, okay, whatever. But this time around, like having it be that way, like this man wanders aimless. He wanders, but he wanders with confidence into the hands of Providence, if you will. Like he's just going where the wind takes him. Then he picks up the stick and he throws it into the air and to see which direction it lands on the path, and whichever way it lands, he goes. And then and the idea of that hit me really hard, like a bag of bricks. And I found myself wanting to be like, everyone, watch this movie for this one moment. It's amazing. He literally picks up a stick and throws it into the air and follows the direction the stick goes, and all this stuff happens because of that. Isn't that amazing? I think most people would just be like, sure, Jay Saki, whatever you say. But that's honestly how it came across to me. I was like, wow, this opening. Like, once that happened, I was like, oh, shoot, I'm in for something really deep. And then the whole rest of the film just worked for me just because of that opening moment, which I did not appreciate like over 12 years ago.
I think you really have to take the context of the film and the country and so on, and who's making it into account when discussing films like that. Because Akira Kurosawa was making Japanese films for Japan. It just so happened that we got them translated. So a lot of this stuff has more influence and a bit more of an artistic mirror to Japan. And in Japan, they love carefree heroes because Japan has been such an industrious country and a collectivist nation and a place where you don't make waves, that just trusting your entire life to providence and destiny is such an attractive feature.
Okay, so here's another question. So I really liked a bunch of these movies, but I know there's a lot of people who have a hard time getting into older black and white movies, especially when they're like older black and white foreign films that you have to read subtitles to watch. And I don't blame people. Like, I really enjoyed The Seventh Seal, but I get that people don't want to watch a medieval Swedish film with subtitles. It's like it's not the initial thing that people want to watch. It's not watching John Wick. I don't blame people because I don't always want to watch old foreign language movies or old black and white films either. I sometimes have to get myself in the right mood. Do you have any advice for people, like, or thoughts on how people might put themselves in the right mood to watch these kind of films?
Um, I guess start with the more popular, accessible ones. Ones like Seven Samurai and Kagemusha and maybe Tora Tora Tora. Those are later films. They're in color. They're very rich with color, as he really liked using color when it came about. They have the same level of almost perfect cinematography, and they're not as long.
Why did you bring Tora 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 up just now?
It's one of his later films. It's
The Pearl
more
Harbor
akin.
movie
Yes,
that was directed by Akira Kurosawa.
yes.
I am almost certain you are wrong. Hold up, audience, while I look that up. That is insane if he directed that.
No, he's the writer.
Oh, he's the writer.
Yeah, according to his IMDb, he's accredited as a writer.
Well,
Oh, funny enough, he was uncredited on the film itself.
okay, according to Wikipedia, the screenplay, the Japanese parts are done by two other people. He's not mentioned here. unless he only did a very small bit.
No, apparently for some reason he was just uncredited on the film.
It says, okay, according to Wikipedia, the Japanese side was initially to be directed by Akira Kurosawa, who worked on script development and pre production for 2 years. However, after 2 weeks of shooting, he was replaced by two other guys who directed the Japanese sections. So, okay,
It's funny.
I think he had a very minor role in that film.
I think it's weird because it's one of the films that gets around in his circles.
I think his involvement was much more minor than you made it sound like.
He was definitely listed as like screenplay and writing for the Japanese side. It's just that how much input did he actually have in the film?
I'm getting the impression very little. He probably wrote 2 lines of dialogue.
But still, that said that he's still technically still a writer on Tora Tora Tora.
That's fine. I just wouldn't tell audience people in the audience watch this as one of his movies because he's
Still
pretty
watch it
far.
though.
Yeah, watch it. It's a good movie. But I was gonna say because bringing this back to watching old black and white movies, somebody once said to me through this viewpoint past me, which is sometimes you have to have culture night. You know, like if you're a family man, you have some kids, and you have to have like the family movie night. Sometimes you have to have culture night where you say, okay, kids, tonight we are going to watch Gone with the Wind, or we're going to watch Babette's Feast, or we're going to watch Seven Samurai or Rashomon. Because and these films are not going to be like a Disney film. They're not going to pop out at you and be like initially enticing, but this is good for you and you will remember it and you will come back to it someday.
You will be cultured. No child of mine will ever be uncultured. You
Yeah,
must know world cinema by 12 and ballet by 13.
there you go. There you go. But yeah, that's my view because I'm not going to act like I'm above being bored by older movies. I get why people don't always want to watch an older movie, especially when it's subtitled. Because I had a hard time even following the stories in all these movies at moments, and I had to like rewind or read something to like get myself back on track. Because yes, I get it. Sometimes having to read subtitles, it makes a language barrier, which can always be harder to get into. So I'm just acknowledging there's a barrier there, but so if you can break past the barrier and sit down and watch some of these films, then I think you might just grow as a person. So, what did we learn? Did you learn anything?
I think there are some actual just game changing artists out there, some people who really are at the top of the industry for a reason, and I think Akira Kurosawa is one of them. And the fact that he was involved in every level of his films shows that everything was really a passion project for him. He didn't just make a film for box office cash.
Well, I'll say what I learned was my hypothesis was wrong, mostly wrong. I still hold that there's probably some level of he was just super popular and that's why he influenced people, but he did in fact create a lot of he influenced a lot of modern filmmaking. And not just because he influenced it, but he influenced things like in a positive way. Like, oh, he influenced Star Wars. It's like dot dot dot. Sure, I guess that's not necessarily positive, but he in fact influenced Star Wars. But there's other things where he positively influenced how filmmaking is done. One thing I learned was, when it comes to a lot of like great artists, it seems like the older we get and the more time goes on, it's harder to go back and read all the great books or watch all the stage plays. I'm suspecting eventually people will only break Shakespeare down to like 3 plays, like Hamlet, Macbeth, and King Lear or something. It'll just be like 3 plays because who has time to watch all of his plays, read or watch his plays? I think with time, people are only going to be able to watch like 4 or 5 of Kurosawa's movies because people only have so much time on their hands to go back and revisit the old. But I was reminded that when revisiting old artists, whether they be writers, playwrights, filmmakers, if you can always go a little bit above and beyond in your research or above and beyond in your viewing, you always learn a little more. Because, I watched Yojimbo then Sanjiro, and I was gonna just and that kind of inspired me to ask you to do this podcast where we talk about him. Then I was like, you know what, watch Rashomon, and then I did that. And I was like, I'm glad I watched that. And then I was like, I should really watch Hidden Fortress, and watching Hidden Fortress altered my perception that much further. I always say, like, for George Orwell, if you really think you're a George Orwell fan, please read Homage to Catalonia, because that's the book that really puts them into perspective for you. You can't just read Animal Farm in 1984. Or for that matter, you have to actually read 1984 all the way through and not just read the first 50 pages to do your book report. So, yeah, I guess that's what I learned. Always read a bit further, watch a few more of an artist's obscure movies, and you just get that much more information. I learned with the genesis of a whole bunch of anime characters, like where they come from, which was specifically personified in Yojimbo and Sanjiro. I'm like, that's where these all come from. Here's Patient Zero for these characters. So yeah, I can honestly say I'm glad I watched these four movies, because just watching those four films taught me a lot. And I think I'll have to watch more of them. Some of the ones you mentioned. I know I definitely need to watch Ran at some point. And what was the other one you mentioned before?
Kagemusha.
How about Akira?
Ikiru is great. It's just a very different type of film.
Well, I'll jot them both down. Yeah. Any other last thoughts?
Uh, I really like samurai cinema.
Yeah, you should send me some more films to watch, because I've been, yeah, whenever I was researching all these movies, I was noticing all these other Japanese films, and I'm like, wow, I've not watched a lot of these Japanese movies, and I think I would like to watch more samurai movies.
Harakiri, both the original and the remake, is excellent, and it's not Kurosawa.
Right, because then you also learn that, you know what, there were other people in Japan also making movies, not just Kurosawa. Kurosawa will be the only one who's ever remembered in 1,000 years. He'll be the Shakespeare of Japanese filmmakers. It's like, in Shakespeare's time, nobody wrote plays except for William Shakespeare. No other plays written. And out of Japan, there's only one filmmaker, Kira Kurosawa. I'm being facetious, audience. Is that all we have?
Well, I could say a lot more, but it would just be reiterating over other points. So yes.
All right. Thanks for being here. Have a good night, everyone.